Hello, everybody, and welcome back to that Milan podcast. Finally, you could have some smiles on your faces. But before we get into everything that happened yesterday, don't forget to subscribe and follow to the podcast here on the channel. And again, just on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your audio podcasts as well. Go and check out the live stream from yesterday that was streamed. It has over 3,000 views already, I believe. So hop in there. There was over 200 of you with me for the majority of the time. I think we averaged over 200, which is an all-time record for the channel. So that's just great, and it shows how happy everybody finally is. Mm-hmm. And Sant'Angelo, why shouldn't anybody be disappointed after what we saw yesterday? Probably, I mean, miraculous is probably the wrong word to use when you're talking about a club like Milan, but it kind of felt like it was a miraculous victory over Inter in the derby. 6 straight defeats is no longer. Milan have the colors of the city right now after a 2-1 victory. We'll get into it, man. I mean, how are you feeling after that? I know you had some people over yesterday. You weren't able to be on the live. So now we finally get to hear your words.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. I mean, I went through so many different emotions in that match. The initial goal. I had some difficulties actually getting the stream going on Paramount. I don't know if anyone else has issues streaming it on like a console, but for some reason it would be on there and then it just be in that little like jingle that they have. So that's another bone to pick I have with Paramount because I gotta get that fixed. But I was watching it. Of course, Pulisic gets the early goal, and my brother kind of gave me the update, and I basically told him, like, nah, shut the hell up. Like, that, no way. Because 2 weeks in a row, Pulisic in big games.
2 games in a row, not even 2 weeks.
2 games in a row. 2 games in a row in big games. Pulisic gets a goal, a very early goal inside a handful of minutes, and that set the tone. I think it was very important for Milan to get an early goal. Or at least to get a lead. Playing from behind, it's a little bit different. Inter can defend. They can be organized. They can play that type of game. And, for Milan to get it through Pulisic was huge. It got the engines going. And obviously, I know you would be conceded. A very bad defensive moment for Milan. DiMarco, good finish, but was left wide open for Maignan. Had nothing to really do there, unfortunately. It was just so many emotions. I told myself even as the match was going on, Inter didn't play that well. Milan looked like the better team for large portions of the match, but knowing how things are with this team and how difficult it's been, you almost expected. I was like, hey, I was even telling myself, like, I'll take a draw. Like, get a good point here. We played pretty well. Move forward with that, and we try to build. And we get it through Matteo Gabbia. Again, there's something I also wanted to address with you as well, Martino, and we can kind of pivot over to that.
Yeah, there's a lot to discuss.
Yeah, it was another goal from corner/set piece with like a header. I mean, Pavlovic versus Lazio. You had, I know, Gabbia originally looked like he scored the goal against Venezia, but it was Fofana. And now you have a goal here. So Milan have something, I feel,
this kid has a nose for goal.
Threat there. And just real quick to kind of put the bow on that, for Gabbia to get that moment, we all know his journey as a Milanista. We know he went on loan, came back. It was amazing. It was amazing to break the streak and to do so in an away derby when Pulisic was silencing the crowd and like the deafness in that stadium because it was so flooded with Inter fans. For Milan to get that moment and for Milan to be rallied around a victory was massive.
Yeah, and there's so much to unpack, and we'll go one by one. So we'll start with the Pulisic one. I think I texted you immediately as well. I mean, this run and finish. He almost did this twice in the match, by the way.
Yeah, he did it before.
There was an opportunity right prior to that where he made a great run, and there was a save. Sommer actually put in a very respectable shift. He was really good for Inter yesterday, probably their best player. I thought everyone else on Inter shockingly poor by their standards and how they usually play against Milan. We'll take it, though. Listen, Pulisic setting the tone, putting to bed of these silly claims that he isn't a big game player just because he had some struggles last year in the bigger matches. But again, against Lazio, here against Inter, obviously against Liverpool. I didn't even mention Lazio yesterday in my clip that I posted. So again, just to have him set the tone once again and, eerily reminiscent of what happened against Liverpool,
Hmm.
and Milan were fine after the goal.
Yeah.
Obviously, that Emerson Royale breakdown, it happened about 15 or 16 minutes after the Pulisic goal. But again, Milan were still creating in those times. And even after conceding that goal against Di Marco, listen, they were not struggling. They didn't look like deers in the headlight after conceding that time, right?
No.
I think we saw that after Liverpool equalized and just the way that they conceded against Liverpool. Again, two of them were not in open play. I think that's the more damning part of this. This one, again, for me, I think this is communication all around. It starts with Emerson Royale. You never abandon a player like that. I don't care what you tell me. Even Matteo Benetti mentioned it on the broadcast on how there were so many players around Lautaro Martinez. You didn't need that much help. That again kind of shows the lack of communication within Milan's defense that we've been hammering on about for weeks on end now. And
Mhm.
for me with this is Emerson Royale does a poor job recognizing the switch. His late rotation to DiMarco in the first place allows that pass to Lautaro. He then bails DiMarco, and DiMarco is probably is the second best left back in the league behind Teo, a really strong technical player. That's why his calm finish in the box was easily doable for him. You just can't let that happen. But again, just a stout defensive performance, man. I think we have to talk about the formation and Paulo
Mhm.
Fonseca here. So I want to transition to this because this will basically capture everything that happened within the match. We mentioned this in the previous podcast episode when we were talking with Christian Aquino, and I had mentioned, and I think I had mentioned it prior, that there were signs of a 4-4-2 where we have two not true strikers as an out and out nine, but Morata and Tammy were on the pitch for some time during a couple of matches. Prior to this, they both get the start in this one. Fonseca had to shake something up again because obviously that 4-2-3-1 was not working. He was interchanging a lot of pieces within that formation. He changes it up here. He
Mhm.
says post match it really wasn't a 4-4-2, but he's right because of the way they were pressing, and Tammy and Morata were not up next to each other. And obviously the manager knows what he fielded. But I think this right here clearly provides the most balance for Milan moving forward. It didn't feel like there was a gulf of space centrally, which kind of, I wouldn't say neutralized Inter, but it kind of kept them at bay compared
Mhm.
to past derbies. For me, I think he nailed this. I think he nailed the substitutes. Uh, and again, man, he saved his job quite simply. He saved his
Mhm.
job. I think quite a few players saved their future for the time being with the club. So again, with that, I think I am so happy and relieved for Paulo Fonseca.
Mhm.
Not because I'm pro Fonseca or anything like that. This is a manager that isn't as bad as he's shown. Maybe he rights the ship with this. What was your thoughts when you first saw the 4-4-2 formation? Was this a welcome change in your eyes?
It was, and I think the one thing I have appreciated and respected about Fonseca thus far through his first batch of games is his ability and understanding to know when, all right, this isn't working when it comes to either the system or when it comes to players within a
Yep,
system.
correct.
We so many times we try to see coaches, that they're ingrained and embedded in a formation. They're like, we're playing a 4-3-2-1 or a 4-2-3-1, and like this is what we're going to keep running out there. And I think Pioli got kind of fell victim to that as well.
One
Was
dimensional.
he was at that moment where he was like, results were very up and down, and it would be the same lineup and it would be the same type of players and the same certain areas on the pitch. And you're like, change it up. Like at this point, you got nothing to lose. We
Yeah,
weren't getting the title last year. We needed results. It was more about maintenance of top four.
yeah,
And you kind of got frustrated. So, in a sense, with Fonseca, I know that people maybe will point this out as a flaw of his so far, is the fact that
yeah.
he can't stick to a formation. He's changing fullbacks. We saw
Oh,
Taracciano,
maybe.
Alexis. We saw so many different guys so far. But in a match like this, I think what was very important was, all right, well, maybe it's not necessarily the selections, maybe it's the shape and setup. And you started to see the four in the back with the four in the midfield. And 2, again, we're assuming this was a 4-4-2, which again, by
Right.
all intents and purposes, it did look like that. And that's what the expectation was when we saw the lineup. It seemed, to your point, have balance. You have the 2 banks of 4, Milan in that 2 midfield setup with Tijani and Fofana, who Fonseca actually said himself after the Liverpool game that they couldn't play together. And while I didn't think Fofana was spectacular, he was much better in this game.
Yeah,
and
I was going to ask
Tijani
you
was
about
fantastic in this game as the man of the match. So I think that overall it provided more balance. But I think the key to the 4-4-2 working in this scenario was the fact that you had 2 workers up front. You had 2 strikers who showed they can play with one another. They don't necessarily need to be ball dominant forward players where you're going to have Morata. He's technical. He will run in behind. He will run in the channels. He will link up with players wide and forward. And when you have Tammy, who is that guy that can, with his height, with his size and physicality, win that ball down, win fouls, invite players to come forward. So it did provide Milan with the right amount of balance. And, if you're someone who is a big buyer in the advanced data, expected goals, Milan were also ahead in Inter in expected goals. I don't know what it was like 2.09 or something.
I think
it's
under 2.0 to like 0.3 or something like that.
So Milan's advanced numbers also showed that. They didn't dominate possession. I think Inter had more possession. But I think if you look at the shots, you look at the amount of chances Milan had to even make this 3-4-5, and I'm not even just specifically saying, with Okafor in the final minutes of the match, but I was even talking how they were in the final third and Rafa, like just skying the ball over the net, missing the chances, weakly kicking it to Sommer. Milan created a lot of chances in this game. So this was the most balanced we've seen Milan at any point this entire season. And it came at the moment when the coach needed it the most, the players needed it the most, the fans needed it the most in the biggest game imaginable this season for them. So the 4-4-2 feels like the way. And as my final point, you know what? To Fonseca's credit, maybe he had this big, huge board and he was like, take this player, formation, this, and this. And he settled on a formation now that the players are comfortable with. You can play a repeatable style of football. And to your point, again, provides the right amount of balance where it's not always going to be maybe spectacular, but when it talks to just more organization, it might work to their benefit to say 4-4-2 is the way forward until, again, we can work on some things. And results like this really show that maybe Milan under Fonseca can turn a corner. And we saw the comments, Martino. This is my final point, because I had so much I wanted to get out, is the quotes from Gabbia and some of these other players. I think it was Tammy. I don't know who exactly said it, but saying that, we're going to fight and back this coach until his last day here.
Gabbia said that.
So these players, despite what maybe the media might put out or, what the feeling might be that, he's lost the locker room, players are disgusted with him, all the Rafa and Matteo stuff from a couple weeks ago. It doesn't seem like it's the case. It seems like that was more frustration with the result rather than with the coach. And I think that a result like this can really be the official start point of the season for Milan.
Yeah, just real quick on that quote. That was from good old Matteo Gabbia, where it was, until the last day we have Fonseca, will follow him to the death, just as we did with Pioli, which is just captain material type of comment. So there's still so much to unpack with this. I think with the formation and with everyone within this formation, I think it's really important to note the work that Morata was doing off the ball. Again, this is the stuff that, in my opinion, as to why he's an upgrade on Giroud. Yesterday, if you have Olivier Giroud with this, they don't win. That doesn't happen.
The intensity is
no pressing. There's no work rate off of the ball. And this isn't even a slight or disrespect to him, but this is the type of dynamic play that someone like Morata and Tammy can both bring to this team, because the fact that they could move changes it all. So for me, I think Morata, and this is exactly what I said to you and Christian when we were talking about, can we have someone with some leadership here? That was the guy going in the middle of the piles replicating what Tonali was doing when
Mhm.
they were like fighting. I think it was to Dumfries, right? So not yesterday, but when Tonali was beefing with somebody, I think it was
Yeah.
with Dumfries. And then again, you see Morata getting in the thick of it. I think it was involving Barella and other players. But that's the exact type of emotion that we want to see. That's what a leader brings. That's what a
Tammy
champion
too.
brings.
Tammy too. When Pulisic got pushed down by Bastoni, and there's like a
Yes.
little mini scrap
Yes.
after the goal.
That's
Tammy
that
was getting
that
in the face of the
shows
ref and the players. Yeah,
signals of a team, something that has pulse,
something that
that's
stokes
there.
some fire.
This
Yeah.
completely, and I'm not saying tactically everything is going to be like this for every single match, right? What I am saying now is that they actually believe that they can be good. That's a huge difference because when I was thinking Inter getting level 1-1, right? And there was a formation change, did it not remind you of when Milan went 2 up in the COVID year on Inter? And you're like, "Oh my god, wow. That's actually
Mhm.
really good play." And they started playing well after the Pioli hire, right? Like he had his turbulence when he first started.
Yeah.
And obviously Milan went on to lose that game, but there were signs of life for the first time in many derbies and just in general for who Milan were playing, level of opponent, situation. They showed like they had something,
Yeah.
something that they could prove that they could. I'm not saying win the Scudetto because I still think Inter are stronger, but this is clearly a team that is a force to be reckoned with when things are going well. Because you mentioned it, scoreline does not reflect that. All Inter fans are admitting it too. It's not like they're even like, Milan got lucky, this or that. Milan could have had 5. I know
Yeah.
Inter maybe 1 or 2 more. Shout out to Magnan. He was fantastic in this game as well. Vintage Magnan. For me, just having the opportunities. Rafa even had a good header. Unfortunately, Sommer made the save as well.
Mhm.
Okafor with the my poor guy Chukwueze, man. My guy. I'm going to war for this guy every week, and he's just getting screwed like that. And I'm a big Okafor backer, so that was upsetting to see. But just in general, man, the amount of depth that they had, and I mentioned this because there's just still so much to unpack. We're only 17 minutes in. Milan have the most goals scored in the league. How many times have we missed chances this season? That's incredible. And we've played some pretty impressive teams. By the way, Lazio and Torino are the league leaders after 5 match days. So maybe that draw doesn't look too bad. That's what I'm saying. But it is. For me, it's just great to see those two forward players, right? Now, midfield, because I want to get you more in depth and talk about it. First of all, wow. This player is ascending to top 5 in Serie A from midfield if he's not there already.
Yeah.
Truthfully, when Reijnders is put in the right position tactically, you see what was on display yesterday, man. He could do everything from set pieces, ball carrying, defensive work rate, just obviously providing great chances. He obviously provided that chance to Tammy, who Tammy said he knew he swung and hooked that a little too hard on that one across the face of goal. But the pass by Reijnders to begin with was just so good and a deserved man of the match. You could have gone 3 different ways with it. I think Gabbia, Reijnders, and Pulisic were all worthy of this. But
Mhm.
Reijnders, this really felt like complete performance in every sense of football. Defensive work rate, offensive output, and just like obviously that ball carrying ability as a midfielder, just the passing in itself. Man, obviously he got the assist on the Gabbia goal. Reinders, when put into position to allow creative freedom, is a player. Is just the best midfielder on this team. Jad said it. You said it multiple times. Reinders was awesome. Please speak on it. And then I want your thoughts on Yusuf Fofana and your overall thoughts on the performance because it was shaky, but I think he eventually stabilized. But first, go with Reinders.
Yeah. The 2 crown jewel signings of Ferlani Moncada and Pulisic and Tijani Reijnders showed up yesterday. I mean, I think, you can make a really, really strong case. It might even be an open shut case at this point that, when you look at everything Pulisic has done, he's been the best signing under those 2. But Tijani's been right there. I mean, look at the presence in the midfield. It's just the way he plays. He plays super tidy. When he gets on the ball, he doesn't feel that pressure. He doesn't rarely ever make a mistake when it comes to where he's putting his next pass. And the fact that before he even receives the ball, he knows where he wants to go with the next pass. He knows what his next move is. And I think that that's what makes him so unique and dynamic. And really, I think, a top 5 Serie A midfielder. I think that, it's really hard to argue against that when you see how important he is for this team. And you could maybe get a sense of that too when he's not on the field. And how do Milan respond or cope without him, right? Which luckily, thankfully for us, knock on wood anywhere, we haven't had to have that conversation too much because he's been the player that's played the most matches for Milan in Serie A, played the most minutes for Milan in Serie A since he's arrived as far as outfield players. I think that's a known fact. Last year, at least it was. Yeah. So when you look at the availability, you look at the fact that when you put him in that midfield, the calm on the ball, the calm in the game. And I think there was a moment in this match yesterday where it was level. It was maybe around like the 65th, 70th minute where, not that the match was getting away from Milan, but I think they were in that moment where they didn't want to get into a certain run and gun with Inter where you're going end to end and that then Milan concede against a counter. I think that there was a moment where it went back and forth. Milan got the ball. Rafa didn't have anything going forward. And rather than pushing it forward into nobody and trying to create something from nothing, he took the ball back. We regrouped. And in that midfield, again, that calm that Tijani brings on the ball, I think is so important. And in many ways, it's almost like early Ismail Benacer when we had him in there, where shifty, you in possession, very press resistant. You can't get the ball from him because I think that we can touch so much on the actual numbers of completed passes, chance creation, the great assist, obviously to Matteo Gabbia. That's a perfect cross in there. It's amazing. So I've been watching that so many times since it's played out.
Yeah.
But just when you look at his overall game, you look at the work rate, you look at so many different things. This guy is a leader in the midfield too. Like you can see it. Like I don't know. There was so many conversations around this signing when we got him because he was coming from Alkmaar and he had a pretty sizable fee there, and people were like, 25 years old, like why aren't other big clubs going after this guy? Why are we spending this much money on a player from this league? And you're really seeing it year 2 pay off, because without this guy in the midfield, it's hard to imagine where Milan are going to go if they can't have Tijani pulling the strings, being that tempo setter, and that player that you just mentioned from a technical standpoint. When he gets on the ball, it just, you feel at ease as a fan. And I think that's that sort of calm he brings to the rest of the guys on the field when matches can be in limbo. It's easy to have a misplaced pass. How many times have we seen that in this sport, Martino, where the game looks like it's kind of in balance, and then it's one errant pass that you try to force, they're off and running, and you concede a goal. So I think that there's a lot of intangibles to Tijani's game from a intelligence standpoint, the way he reads and understands the game, and when to kind of sort of pick his moments to progress, carry, slow the game down, and so on and so forth. So a really good performance from him. And I think that we're entering conversations now where he's still quite underrated amongst European midfielders.
Oh, 100%.
Because I think it's Serie A midfielders, I think it's pretty understandable and pretty apparent that he's very good. But I think you started to see it, at the Euro, where he got so much praise from non-Serie A people.
Great with the Dutch.
And now you're starting to see it come into this season. And when you have a performance like he did in a derby, many more people are going to take note of his quality.
Yeah. He's been great for them. He did great just this past international break. I think people are finally realizing the type of player that he is, just on a wider scale. Yeah. So just very happy with his performance. So yeah, we'll go to the defensive. Fofana, which you didn't really get a chance to touch on. Shakiness, not a necessary yellow. That was poor. I would also say prior to that, he had the ability to pass out to Teo wide, which he failed to do. And that just put Milan in a bad situation because he gave the ball away and Inter were quickly on the counter. It was almost in our final third. It was just in the middle third, closer to our goal, which was a problem. You just can't give the ball up in that area. However, him and Royale, in my opinion, have very similar matches yesterday, where they had glaring mistakes, but the overall ability to rally and stabilize themselves was a sight for sore eyes. Obviously, Fofana has struggled a little bit, harder to get integrated within the squad. with that cohesiveness. One of the hardest positions in sports is what he's trying to pick up on and adjust to. I think a lot of people are jumping the gun on him. I think that's super unfair when it comes to that with him, because again, Yusuf Fofana isn't a true number 6 like that. So when you're kind of forcing him into this double pivot, again, we say time and time again, he's out of position. How could we really judge a player like that? I see so many people on Twitter just like, we wasted so much money on Fofana already. It's like, Jesus Christ, guys, can we chill out? Can we chill out for 2 seconds? I understand wanting to get mad and annoyed at the people that have been here for quite some time, but can we back off on
People
the
were
one
saying that
player?
too about Tijani when he was missing chances in the box last year. People were saying the same thing.
It's unbelievable how quickly we jump the gun on some guys, and I get it because it's an avalanche of emotions, rather focused on negativity
Yeah.
because of the start for the year. But like, relax. Then we'll go to Emerson Royale with this. I mean, he's at fault for the goal for the most part. I thought he rallied and his second half was solid. I have to give him credit. I really do. I don't think there was much threats coming from the left at that point. And when he had that kind of ability towards the end, right? When it comes down to the grittiness of winning a match, where he prevents a corner from happening, he has a throw in come in. Just a little fine details that matter in Inter having a set piece corner or a throw in. It's a drastic difference because it prevents them from getting a much greater chance of scoring. So for me, Emerson Royale and Fofana turned it around. And I think having those two get positive performances at the end, right, is a huge plus, because you don't want players like that to have compounded failures at the start of their tenure, because it could spiral out of control. It could get worse. And by the way, like someone like Lautaro has got like still hasn't scored this year, by the way. And he's got like one goal in his past like 12 to 15 matches for Inter. He's really struggling in terms of that. He's on that streaky part of his game right now. So again, Matt, they did a good job against one of the best attacks in Europe. This is one of the best teams in Europe, and they did a really good job. They played better against Inter than Manchester City did, and like by a wide margin, I would add. Obviously, emotions are different. I don't give a shit what Interisti say, but only had one game extra of rest. Yeah, but aren't you much better than us? Isn't that the whole point of this thing? Aren't you that much better? Would it 1 day of rest matter? No, it doesn't matter now. Just saying. But we could just circle back to this. I mean, this yesterday, the pictures standing up like he's Dwayne Wade on the scorer's table in the NBA, just putting his arms up. You know this, and again, there's another baseball reference, and you'll get this one, and I'm sure some of the other listeners and followers. Everyone always dreams in your backyard. It's bottom of the ninth, game 7 of the World Series. Bases are loaded. It's 3-2 count, 2 outs. You dream of hitting a home run to hit a walk-off grand slam to win the World Series, right? Always along those lines. Something you replicate in your backyard when you're trying to be someone great. That moment yesterday with Gabbia scoring a game-winning goal in a derby after joining Milan 12 years ago, being brought up in their youth system, having the ability to start, having shaky starts and appearances over the course of his first tenure at Milan, getting loaned out to Villarreal, coming back. I genuinely do not remember or can't recall a player coming back from loan and making this significant progress. Because this is exactly why I say loan Colombo, let him get minutes, stuff like this, because you get this when he's ready and not afraid of the moment. And he understands the gravity of it all. Like that, there isn't, and I know that might sound bad because we do want him to win trophies and we want to be very successful, but he's probably never going to have a bigger moment in his career than what he just had. It's definitely going to be up there. For him, I'm just so happy because it wasn't just a performance capped off by a game-winning goal. It was a complete performance by a defender. This was a great performance by him. Inter fans were talking about it. The broadcast was talking about it. And then it's capped off with that header. Emotionally, you're so happy for him in particular compared to all these other players because you know he's uno di noi. He's one of us. So kudos to you. It's emotional, and I couldn't stop smiling yesterday. It's one of my favorite all-time moments. I think I tweeted about it. There was my favorite three derbies of the past 10 years or so are Antonio Donnarumma turning into Buffon against Inter in Coppa
Mhm.
Italia. Cutrone scored the winner. So it was
Yep.
just overall big emotions there. Obviously, the Giroud brace to spearhead the win for the Scudetto. And quite honestly, yesterday was just right up there. There's just so many emotions involved in losing six straight derbies, losing the Scudetto on your head, getting eliminated from the Champions League, losing a Coppa Italia final, losing a Supercoppa final. I mean, all the types of losses, just at face value, the losses are brutal. But how and what was at stake in most of those matches hurts. And now they have the opportunity to celebrate. And I'm genuinely just so happy for this guy because now he's proving that he's a real player and he belongs at Milan. So hats off to Gabbia, and just your kind of thoughts on just this storyline because it's remarkable.
Matteo Gabbia is becoming a solid defender for Milan on merit, and I think it's a different conversation when you look at Milan youth products and their roles and them gaining them on seniority and caps rather than on merit and performances. And
Yeah.
this is where that conversation comes in with Davide Calabri, who has the captain's armband. But I think, has he had any signature performances that can kind of replicate this? I'm not saying, game winning goal in the derby, but
Yeah.
moments like this against Inter where you're like, okay, that's our captain. Like, that's our guy.
I get what
That,
you're saying. Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? And I'm not
Of
saying that
course.
Gabbia should be captain. I'm not saying that. But I think that, it has a little bit of different feeling when it's a player that was maybe viewed as surplus, right? He was sent away
Sure.
to Villarreal. He wasn't even a pure starter there, and due to a crisis, Milan are like, all right, you come back. And I know that you look, they're professionals, they have a job to do,
Yep.
but the fact that he was so completely open to it, he's like, okay, I'm coming back. And it wasn't just a comeback and these guys didn't want me. They didn't think I was good enough. And I think, people might say that, well, why would he feel that way? You'd be surprised. Like people and players in this sport, when the money's there, they feel bitter. They feel you've done wrong. And how many times have we seen that where players like, I don't want to go back. I don't want to play there. They treated me poorly.
Yeah.
Find a better solution. Find another club in Serie A that will give me more opportunity. And since he's arrived, I don't even think it's really an argument that he's been Milan's best defender, which is saying a
Since he
lot
came back,
because
yeah.
in the Scudetto year, what was he, fifth? He was behind Cagliari. He was behind Kalulu. He was
He was an
behind
emergency
Tomori.
option, yeah.
He was really an afterthought. And this is a Scudetto winning defender who's tasted that type of glory, who's tasted that moment, albeit in a different role. So for him to take on a moment in this situation with the club, facing tons of pressure, the coach's job being questioned at every turn, and Milan absolutely they needed a result here. They needed something. This is something he will never forget. This is
Right.
something that he will tell his children about, his grandchildren about. And again, we don't care who scores the goal. In most cases, we just don't. We just want to win. We just want to see this team beat Inter. But you're right. Like it felt like a little sweeter when it was one of our own guys, one of our own academy players. And you don't think that some of the individuals in the Zaroli, Camarda are looking at this and like that could be me one day. I could be the hero of a derby. It's special. It's a special
Whatever young
feeling.
kids are in the stands too.
Right. They're looking at
Witnessing.
this game and they're thinking like, I can do it too. And I think that there was so many things you can take away from the performance from, the tactics, selections, all these sorts of things. But at its very core, like moments like we saw yesterday with Matteo Gabbia are the reason why we love this club and the reason why we love
Yep.
this sport. So a big ups to Matteo Gabbia, Matthew Cage. I know Tomori, everyone was spamming his comments on Instagram. So yeah, he's definitely loving it right now. And this is such a galvanizing victory from a confidence standpoint and a mental standpoint. Just to harp back quickly on Fofana, because you asked me how I thought he did.
Hmm.
And same thing with Emerson. I think that it was so important from a psychological standpoint for Milan to get that result in the way they did, because I think that while Emerson has struggled so far, while Fofana has struggled so far, I think results like that could almost put the team at ease, and some of these players that are on the fringe of like, am I going to be benched? Am I going to, what's going on? People are calling me a flop, whatever. And when you put forth like a good second half and it directly contributes towards the result that you were dreaming of, I think that can kind of get guys like Emerson and Fofana to be like, okay, like I can play here. I've experienced something like that in this shirt. Everyone's hugging, everyone's rallying, going under the Curva Sud at the end of the match with the fans there. You have that sort of signature moment at a club, and then you feel like you've arrived. And I think that was so important for a lot of the members of this team that really needed something. They needed something to grab onto in a moment. And the Venezia game wasn't that moment. It was 4-0. It was at home, yes. But to do something like this in a derby can really be something special for the confidence of this group going forward.
Yeah. And you're 100% right. I think I think everyone is annoyed on the defensive play in the Lazio game, right? And just hear me out when I'm saying this. There's 3 straight positive results in Serie A. Away to Lazio at the Olimpico when you're struggling to get a draw and come back after the 2-1. I mean, you benching Rafa and Teo was a negative. There was a lot of negatives with it, but the result itself, you can live with a draw at the Olimpico. Beat down Venezia, great. And now you beat Inter. You're rolling a little bit. And mind you, I mentioned this to people, 2 consecutive match days of gaining 2 points on Juve. So they've gained 4 points on Juve recently. They're still level on points with Inter. Despite this poor start and really disgusting start, Milan are right in the thick of it.
And guys, look
3
at
points
last year. Milan, look how Milan started last year. The results they had, they were entering the derby. I think they were level on points with Inter, right? Or
they were both undefeated. They both won every single game.
I think maybe because of goals differential, Milan were ahead. They went into that derby.
It depends. Milan started off like great.
They went into that derby after the international break, and they got absolutely demolished. And really, at that point, they weren't anything close to a Scudetto contender. Yeah. Look at Milan this year. Horrific start. New players not playing well. New coach not doing the job, and his job under question. And now you get this type of performance where, again, it really also wasn't just the scoreline. Obviously, 2-1 is a good scoreline. It means we got the victory. But it's the way you did it. It's Pulisic, getting that big moment. It's certain players taking that next leap in their game. Tijani, we didn't have the luxury of a lot of these players that we brought in last year of having good derbies and having that good moment in this fixture. So Pulisic having this goal, mind you, too, also, I don't know if you guys saw this as well, his family was in attendance. I think his parents and his girlfriend were there at the derby.
So was speaking of people in attendance, I don't know if you know this, but a certain person was there yesterday. I'm not sure if you know.
Spalletti?
Paolo Maldini.
Oh, I thought you say Spalletti because of Gabbia. I heard that.
Well, that was like a thing, like Skira tweeted that he was there.
Yeah.
He was considering Gabbia.
But Paolo.
I want to talk. Yeah, but Paolo Maldini was there. But speaking of Paulo Fonseca, I know I feel a bit vindicated with the win, but my God, the amount of like pressure off of my shoulders for backing this manager, I feel okay, because Jesus Christ, guys, you act like I selected the guy. Not saying our commenters here, but like that, I get some of them.
Right, it's crazy. Everyone thinks like we handpicked this guy.
We literally got like an hour and a half podcast with Rui dos Santos on how we wanted Conceição, and everyone's like, of course these fucking Yanks wanted Fonseca. Listen, Fonseca's not as bad as most of you like to believe he is, and obviously I don't think he's this club changing sort of manager. However, this is where I thought he could do something, like provide balance for the team, change it up tactically. And that's the most refreshing part about him, Matt. He's not scared of change. Pioli, right? Like, how many times did it take to figure it out? Pavlovic played pretty well. Pioli felt like, he would have kept playing Pavlovic, right?
Yeah.
Pavlovic subpar in instances. Okay, you sit, Gabbia, you go back in. We'll try with Tomori. Gabbia is probably not going to lose his starting spot right now. I think him and Tomori are sort of locked in there. It'll be difficult and interesting to see how Pavlovic develops in terms of playing time. Obviously, there's going to be tons of matches. We're going to get a little look ahead to Leece soon. But just his absolute future in this, we heard all the rumors. We heard names linked. We talked about it last episode with Christian. He was a dead man walking, as close as you could be heading into this. And I am so happy for him because this is a good person. This is someone who clearly is competent when it comes to being a manager. Again, not the greatest in the world because he had some shortcomings. There were still chances, but like when you can see that he's able to pull off adjustments like this in the highest pressure situations, it's a really positive sign. And not only did he not just save his job for now, and we'll see how it goes because other results matter, other fixtures matter. He saved his job entirely. Like he is okay now. What Milan have to do and the players have to do is step up, because also this was something that if Milan had lost yesterday, I wanted to harp on a little bit more. We still have a lot of players to blame. I tweeted out yesterday when Royale is at fault for conceding that goal yesterday, Matt. I have a hard time blaming the manager for that.
Yeah.
I have a hard time blaming the manager when Tomori doesn't pick up his man and it's Konate. I have a hard time blaming managers when it has to do with basics and fundamentals of professionals. Tactically, we can get on him. You're starting Salamaker's left back. What are you doing? Why are you starting Ruben Loftus-Cheek as the number 10 time and time again? Those are the negatives. However, this is just great. This was just so good. This was the best managed game by a Milan manager, definitely since Pioli took it to Napoli in the Champions League. This was right here, tactical masterstroke. Because there's a difference between a team owning you and constantly beating you to completely outplaying them, right? There's, the victory over Inter, right, Matt, where we win 2-1. The Giroud brace. We did not dominate that entire match.
No.
That was very back and forth. Inter were very much in control.
It was a pocket of minutes.
Yeah, that Milan took advantage of their stuff. This was the best one in years.
From start to
the most complete, dominant one, should you say, since 3-0, right? With Alex scoring the goal. I think it was that type of level. And we're talking about almost a decade ago. And that's the way the derbies have been. To put in that type of performance, that's huge. It's a weight off of everyone's shoulders involved. And there was comments from Jerry Cardinale today. I'll try and pull them up. But seriously, man, like, talk about what your thoughts were. I know you talked about it a little bit, but what were your thoughts on him and what the situation was? Did you think he was a goner, draw, or loss yesterday?
It really, I thought, hinged on the type of performance overall. I thought if Milan got a draw, again, if Gabbia didn't get the game winner and it was 1-1 and Milan played the way they did, I actually did feel that maybe they would have wrote it out with Fonseca again. Because I think that you and I were in agreement to have everything rest on beating the best team in the league. And that being the decisive factor of okay, now he's gone. I think if Milan came out extremely poor and flat and Milan lost the game, then absolutely he was gone. Or if they clinged to a 1-0 lead and then gave away something late and they didn't play that all that well, I thought then again he could have been let go. But the fact that you put together a pretty polished 90 minutes, you pushed the right buttons as far as your selections, your tactical adjustment, and you got the result that you desired, I thought was key. But I also think too, when it comes to this team, is that it takes a lot as a coach and as a group of players to show up in this way after the result they had against Liverpool, because they had to sit with that one for 4 or 5 days. The media, you're playing against a big English team, a team that's going to get a lot of coverage. And from optics, people are looking at it like laughing at Milan. They're laughing at Fonseca. They're laughing at Rafa. All their players. This is Milan. This is the type of performance they put in the Champions League. They got completely destroyed by Liverpool aside from the Pulisic goal. They didn't do anything. They can't compete with these clubs. So for Milan to have to sit with that for a couple days, rebound quickly, amidst all the talk of Rafa and not performing in matches like that against Liverpool, Fonseca not still being able to figure it out, all the talk around the different coaching names, right? These players see it more so than they did in years prior, where it's everywhere. They got social media. They see it. Gazette, all the main, Terzic, all these guys being linked to my job. And he's like, I'm still here. So for you to have to still focus on your job, rebound in the biggest game of the year and get a result and somehow galvanize an entire group to believe that they can actually beat this team that's had their number for the last 6-7 games. It says a lot about how Fonseca has been able to get through to them at that stage from a psychological standpoint. I don't know what the conversation was. Obviously, we don't know that. We're not privy to what's going on in the inner workings there. But the fact that we're able to see Fonseca get it right and get it right in this game and have all those players. I don't know if you saw you probably did, but AC Milan was posting a lot of the content after the fact, and they showed the view of the goal from the bench area, and then the goal go in, and how Tammy, Emerson, Morata all rushed over to Fonseca. Do you know how much relief in that moment he probably felt as a coach with all the pressure on him? He's like, I'm coaching Milan. I had that moment in the Milan derby.
I'm actually not sure I actually saw that.
No one thought we could do this. No one thought we could do this. And there's still a lot of work left to be done. And Milan, truthfully, this match and the feelings and emotions and the well-being of this result really won't mean all that much in the grander scheme of things if they can't continue to compile and build on this. If their next results are poor, everyone's going to say, oh, that was a fluke. Nah, they can't do it again. That was a one-off. It was more Inter didn't play well. Inter didn't rise to the occasion of the fixture. Milan got them on a bad day. They played, they had the game against City. That's what the conversation will be. But if Milan builds from it, people are going to show and point to this match and say, there's a good group of footballers here. There's a good team here. But this team has resolve. They can get through difficult stages and difficult periods. It's easy. We've talked about it. It's easy to support this club when the results are poor, when the players are poor, when the market's poor, and there's so much turmoil.
Well, it's hard to support
surrounding the team. It's easy to, okay, whatever. We're used to it. But when you have expectations of doing great things, and we've seen in recent years Milan win a title, they've reached that point, they've been good enough to get a trophy. And you have difficulties. Now it's like, okay, we're going to throw this at you. How do you and your guys respond to that? And they responded. And I think that really comes down to a lot of the trust, the confidence, and the faith that Fonseca has been able to instill in these guys. And, people are going to maybe say we're flip-flopping, we're prisoner of the moment. In the comments, guys, I've said this since day one. Martino said this since day one. I've tweeted it out plenty of times. We're on record saying it on many videos. Fonseca wasn't our first choice. But as soon as he signed for AC Milan,
we backed the guy.
We backed him. He coaches the club that we support, that we create content for hours around. I have zero agenda towards the coach. If he's coaching this club and we get results like that, let's go. I hope he builds. I hope he has a great career here as a coach. And I hope he has more moments like he did last night.
Yeah. It's definitely something to build on. I think a lot of the players himself, the management have a lot to prove. And this was a big step forward in sort of gaining that trust. We'll go on to this Jerry Cardinale interview. Our friends at Sempre Milan had it. So we'll just pull it up. I'll have it as well. These comments were just very interesting to me. He had this interview with Giornata dello Sport. in New York, and Calcio Mercato basically had them. On the Milan purchase, when we Redbird bought Milan, it was to bring to Italy what we do for a living. There's a much bigger strategy than what we play every week in Italy, which is to win matches, which is still very much on the business side of things and what I've constantly said he does. Regarding the derby, today we play against our colleagues from Inter. It's the derby, and that's the goal. I think these were kind of like off. If people like me and Steven Pagulica, who owns Atalanta, by the way, part Boston Celtics owner, have come to Serie A. I think this is the kind of meeting and discussion is fundamental. Don't really understand what any of that means. That doesn't make much sense. Has to be some sort of mistranslation there. And then changing for Serie A. When I look at Serie A and Milan, I wear several hats as a fan. The Milan one, the Serie A one, and the Italy one, where he's talking about all the different perspectives in which you look at through Milan, right? If you have the Milan hat on, how do they look long term? They're most likely fine. Italy and Serie A, very shaky because of many different reasons, obviously, as we all know. The concept of made in Italy should return as the highest premium quality globally. I think Ferrari, Loro Piana, Brunello Cucinelli. I think like kind of all this stuff when Jerry's commenting on these things, he's not wrong in the business sense. He's not. I don't think he's ever kind of been wrong. However, I think the comments here at the bottom are kind of where I think he's trying to learn. And again, I hope Jerry succeeds. I think everyone should want Jerry to succeed. I'm not saying you have to like him or not. You guys can have whatever thoughts you want. But anyways, bringing them back to the top. And one of the things I would like to do as a director of Milan, as a participant in Serie A, is to work with the members of the Italian ecosystem to bring Italy back to what it means in terms of European football. I see Serie A as one of Italy's greatest exports. Ecosystem is a very bad buzzword. Don't use it. Just don't use it, because it's going to turn off so many people, because they hear ecosystem. It's a buzzword to economics. Economics equals finances. Finances equals transfer budget. Jerry, why aren't you spending a lot of money? That's how Milan fans work. Just be careful with it.
I think a lot of times too, what's interesting about Jerry and the way he mentioned in that translated interview, right, from Sempre Milan, and there were some tidbits there where I'm like, I can kind of side with. I understand kind of where he's going with this when it comes to like his sort of speak on, Serie A and Calcio, and he's like, it's such a pure brand. And a lot of those things I agree with. And we all know the reasons as to why the league isn't at the same level as the Premier Leagues or La Liga and so on and so forth. We all know that. We're not going to spend time on that. But I think a lot of times it's again his delivery of certain things, like when he said it, you always mention it, right? And we mentioned in the last episode where he talked about, there's no better person for speaking on or being representing Milan than Zlatan. It's like, you can say it in a certain way where it's like, when it comes to representing Milan, there's very few that are right. Like there's a way to say certain things.
Zlatan Ibrahimovic is a great indicator of what
he's
it means.
He's a champion of Milan, and he's one of the best representations of what Milan.
Representative of the club.
Correct.
All that. You don't say there's no one better after you sack the Babe Ruth of the New York or of AC Milan.
Yeah.
You can't just sack the most significant figure in club
history. That's where fans get pissy. And it comes off as
incredibly ignorant.
Because again, it's the ignorance of the league, where it's like he's a smart man. Like he hasn't gotten to this.
You don't work for Goldman Sachs that long,
right? Like you don't get to what he's done if you're not have intelligence and that the brain power to get to this level, right? We're not saying that, but I think it's one of those things where people will see an interview, they're like, "You had me in the first part, but now you lost me."
And he needs like a PR coach. And I'm willing to just help if it's like via LinkedIn.
When it comes at least again to speaking, because
just speaking on like there's certain things.
He's saying these things, and he's saying these things in English, and
the translations are terrible.
Right, but like
not.
So he's speaking to a predominantly Italian fan base, right? Like vast majority of its fan base, and you go into American, whatever other areas, but like rooted in Italy. And in the city of Milan. So like you're speaking in a certain way where it's like, okay, you come off as like the snobbish American guy that's like talking dollars and cents and
He
economics and
doesn't even
finances.
come off as
And then,
snobbish at all in these interviews. He really doesn't.
yeah,
He's so deeply rooted in his business principles. And I know people like
yeah,
this. I know you work in this kind of area too, where when you talk to people like this, their main motivation is business.
yeah,
And obviously there's negatives when you come in. You can't take the emotions out of football. Like obviously the sales of Tonali, Maldini, like we're still vehemently against what happened there and how they went about it. He just needs to understand too. And then this is where the mistranslation annoys me so much because people think that Jerry Cardinale sat there at a presser, right, or this convention where he's being interviewed, and people actually think he sat there and said, "I don't want to win the Scudetto every year." When that comment was made, what his comment was, geniuses, please just listen. It's because it's very annoying because you're adding more pressure and fuel to the fire when it's not necessary. What he said was, and he talks about it here when he's putting his hat on, if you're Serie A, right? If you're running Serie A, you're this president of the league. Is it good for the same team to win every single year? And the answer is no. As a product, it's not good. For the particular fan base in which someone is supporting, where it's Juve 9 straight
you
years,
could care less.
good lord, it's incredible. It's the greatest thing. Juventini are never going to shut up about it, and rightfully
Yeah.
so. Like I understand where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you're trying to grow a league that is nowhere near the Premier League, and what were all the comments when Juve won 9 years in a row? Farmers League. This league sucks. They can't do anything. There's no one else
Why
that
am I
can
going to
win it.
watch? They're not. We already know who's going
And
to win.
look at how the narrative changes the past few years when Juve aren't winning every year. It's a different winner. It's chaotic.
I mean,
A lot
Atalanta's
of
winning
fun.
the Europa League,
There's
and
parity. There's so much to it. And Jerry is 100% right when he's saying that. He's dead on because why do we or people lose interest in the Premier League recently? Because City win it all the time. They win it all the time. You know how inevitable it is.
mm-hmm.
Same can go for Bundesliga when Bayern constantly won. Leverkusen shook it up. More eyeballs to that league. That's what Jerry's talking about. Obviously, as the owner of AC Milan, he wants to win every fucking trophy. He said it. He has said it in an interview. And people mock him for it because they've done a really poor job in attempting in succeeding in that facet. But the guy doesn't know what he's doing in terms of PR. It's hurting himself and his figure as the face of this owner, where fans had expectations of a different direction when he purchased the club. And that's the reality of it. And a look ahead to Lecce. Got to stick with the same formation, right? Like you can't change up too much regarding this. Lecce are very respectable. They're giant slayers. They play up to their opponents.
Mm-hmm.
They had a good performance, I believe, over the weekend. What are your thoughts going into this? What do you want to see from Milan? 2-2 draw against Parma. They absolutely collapsed. That's what it was.
It's got to be a win. It's got to be a win.
I meant tactically, formations wise, not predictions.
Oh,
right?
okay. I mean, it's
win. Obviously, yes. You have.
Yeah, no. I think the formation. You have to stick with the same shape and skeleton as far as the 4-4-2. I think, there'll be enough time in between matches. You can maybe tinker a little bit. Maybe if Pulisic is, you want to give Pulisic a little bit of a break and start Chukwueze, whoever the case may be. I think more or less we're going to probably see a very similar 4-4-2. You might see one change, minor alteration, but I think generally speaking, when it comes to the formation and the players, it's going to be more or less the same of what we saw against Inter, because I think that Fonseca really can't afford. He needs to compound victories. He needs to get out from the deep end, right? Like that first win against Venezia was good because he needed to get the first one, and then obviously the derby helped him exponentially. But he needs to now, okay, like we're heading to shore, like. We've arrived. We're heading the right direction. We're winning hopefully 3 matches in a row in the league. We're still well in that conversation for the top of the table, because everyone else is also kind of, showing some signs of slipping up. So I don't think he can be in a position where he can afford to get a little too cute. Again, of course, we'll have to wait and see how players, in the aftermath of the game, when it comes to like fitness levels and, training, if any players kind of don't feel quite for it. We talked about the what was it, the Liverpool game, I think, yes, where Malik Chow and Calabria weren't fit.
Correct.
Maybe there's something where Calabria plays from the start instead of Emerson against Lecce, something like that we might see. But I think, again, Fonseca, given how, dire his start to life at Milan has been, barring, of course, with the exception being the derby, I think he can't afford to be in that sort of position where he's going to be like, all right, tear this down. We're going to go back to a 4-2-3-1. I think he got to put out a formation and field a group that can get that sort of repeatable style, that muscle memory as a group, if you will, and put good performances one after the other together. And I think that's what we'll see as far as his approach to this.
Yeah, I think he's going to keep largely the same formation as far as minutes go. I don't think he's going to be that heavy on playing everyone, depending upon the scoreline. I think where you're going to see some consistency is absolutely the same back four. I would assume Reijnders and Fofana once again start next to each other. Chukwueze, I was thinking about him. Pulisic and Leao out wide, and looks like Morata and Tammy again. We'll see. Maybe he chooses to go with like one and put someone in the other position that he maybe mentioned just to keep legs fresh. But I need to remind some people they do have decent striker depth. So Jovic and Okafor as well to back up these players. They don't have to play the full 90, as we mentioned. You could bring on Okafor again. Okafor did play well. It was just an awful miss. So I think that got highlighted by, I know we're just, but he saved us so many times. I guess Okafor can afford that, and we won. So we have to look past it. Maybe Chukwueze features a little bit heavier minutes wise. There's a little bit of a lesser extent of heavy fixtures in Serie A. Fiorentina has been struggling. That's a team they're going to face. They still have to face Leverkusen, which is just UEFA just give us a gauntlet to start the Champions League. It's like we're in the group of death again. Yeah, just give us a Liverpool. Oh, you want Leverkusen, right? The guys got dark magic every time it goes to stoppage time. It's unbelievable. They're going to be really difficult. But again, then you cruise to international break. So I think here is where you try and kill off games early, stabilize, pick up your 3 points, move on to the next match day. That's what I'm expecting against Lecce. And that'll pretty much do it for this podcast. We're a little bit over an hour now. A great victory for Milan over Inter Milan. Just so good. Just so good. 2-1. Gabbia with the winner. Again, thank you guys so much for all of your support. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, that Milan Podcast, on Apple, Spotify, and wherever else you listen to your podcasts. On Twitter, we are at that Milan Pod. That is in the description. Check out the MLM podcast, Old Heart Rossonero. Check out Football Kush, who's always a good friend of ours, Sempre Milan Podcast, Milan Weekly Podcast, Milan Coast to Coast with Gio and Fabio. Forgot anything, Serie A sit down with Frank and Richard Charman as well. Everyone celebrating. Good week for Milanisti. And again, you can follow me at Martino Puccio everywhere. Matt, his stuff has been at the bottom this entire time. Any final words, Santangelo, before we end here?
As always, thank you guys for supporting. I know, Martino, I tuned into your live. I couldn't join and speak on anything, but I had it up on the TV. I was,
I saw
showing love, and I know the community on here as well was doing the same. So
great.
Thank you guys for supporting the channel. Thank you guys for liking, subscribing, interacting on Twitter, which our account is growing quite a bit. So all our growth, it's
get us to 1K followers. We just surpassed 600.
And moments like we had yesterday against Inter, they feel that much more special when we can celebrate them and share them with you guys. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Like, subscribe, and that'll do it for us. Take care.